So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 7th of the 13 webinars that are part of the 2020 EMOS webinars program. My name is Caterina Giusti. I'm Professor of Statistics at the University of Pisa in Italy, and today I will act as the webinar facilitator. As this is a live event, I would like to specify that today I'm connected from my house, as all the other members of the EMOS staff of the University of Pisa, and as our speakers, and I guess also as many of you. But as for the past webinars that we already had, I'm happy that also today we have this opportunity to join all together for this new EMOS webinar. So now going back to our webinar, let me first explain from any newcomers that EMOS stands for the European Master in Official Statistics, a joint project of universities and data producers in the EU member states, EFTA and EU candidate countries. If your university is interested in applying for the EMOS label, please consider that a permanently open call for universities is available on the EMOS dedicated page on the Eurostat website. For staying in contact with the EMOS news and community, please follow the EMOS on Twitter. The EMOS account is @EU_EMOS. Now, before I give the floor to our speakers, let me briefly explain how we run the webinar today. As a participant, you can watch and listen to the session. To interact with the presenter, you can use the chat, represented by the comic symbol that we already used. We encourage you to prepare your questions and pose them during the presentation or the question breaks. Should you have any technical problem, please try restarting the Skype for Business or the computer or device that you are using. For more specific technical questions, you can use the chat and you will receive a reply. In any case, please consider that the slides of the presentation are already available on the EMOS 2020 events website. So today I have the great pleasure to host Daniele Vignoli from the University of Florence and Eleonora Meli from ISTAT, the Italian National Statistical Institute. Daniele Vignoli is full professor of demography at the University of Florence. He is co-director of the Florence Population Studies Center between the University of Florence and the European University Institute. Currently, he leads the ERC Consolidator Grant on Economic Uncertainty and Fertility in Europe, and the grant on the Great Demographic Recession, financed by Italian Ministry of Education, University and Research. Daniele's research interests address social demography, family demography, and life course. Eleonora Meli is a sociology and social researcher. Since 2001, she has carried out research at ISTAT in the field of social statistics, especially in the context of multipurpose household surveys. She is in charge of the survey on households, family, social subject, and life cycle. Her research projects explore a variety of family-related issues. Today, they will present about demographic change and official statistics. So, Daniele, the floor now is yours until the first question break, and then Eleonora will take the floor.
Okay. Thank you, Caterina. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yes, good. Good afternoon, everybody. And first of all, let me acknowledge the organizers of this webinar for having invited us to present some reflections on demographic change and official statistics. And as Caterina introduced, this is a joint reflection with Eleonora Meli from the Italian National Institute of Statistics. And I would like to start by stating that demography matters. The economy, labor market, healthcare, the environment, pensions, and intergenerational relations are all driven by demography. How official statistics monitors demographic change and contributes to our understanding of the determinants of demographic change is the topic of this talk. Eleonora and I decided to divide the presentation into two parts. First, I will offer a general introduction of European population trends and prospects, with a specific focus on fertility trends in the era of uncertainty. And I will pose major challenges that official statistics will face for the study of fertility in the years to come. And then Eleonora will take over the presentation and will address these challenges from the side of official statistics. And let us start with the European demographic megatrends. The European Union has seen its population grow substantially, by around a quarter since 1960, and it currently stands at over 500 million people. However, the world population has grown faster, more than doubling over the same time frame and reaching nearly 7.4 billion today. Overall, as this figure clearly shows, while the European Union population is now growing only slowly and is even expected to decline in the longer term, the world population continues to grow substantially. And the demographic forces that affect these demographic population megatrends are, of course, fertility, migration, and longevity trends. In fact, life expectancy, fertility, and migration are the three forces that are altering the makeup of Europe's population. Analyzing the demographics has become increasingly important, since most projections suggest that aging populations will be a major challenge for the EU in the future. What is population aging then? Population aging means an increasing median age in a population due to declining fertility rates on the one side, that is called population aging from the bottom of the population pyramid, and rising life expectancy, which is the population aging from the top of a population pyramid. In this process of population aging, migrations play an important role. Migration to Europe from third countries has been substantial over the past few decades and plays an important role in shaping the demographics of both the EU as a whole and its single member states. While migration can play an important role to fight against population aging, in the short run, clearly because enlarging migration allows to enlarge the population segments in their productive and reproductive ages, it is unlikely that migration alone will be able to reverse the overall trends of population aging in the long run. This is because also migrants then will age. Fertility is here the real game changer. This is why, in what follows, I will focus on fertility trends and determinants, but I am certainly open to answer questions also on migration and mortality in the question breaks. Before we look at fertility trends, however, let me start by referring to a popular paper published in Population Development Review in 2014. The authors of this paper are two demographers, Tomasz Sobotka and Eva Bourgeois, who analyze responses of women of reproductive age from 168 surveys conducted in 37 countries between 1979 and 2012. None of the analyzed surveys suggest a decline in mean ideal family size to below 1.9 children per woman. This is why they entitled the paper 2 is best. The ideal family size thus remains 2 children per woman on average. This is an important starting point for us because despite this ideal family size of 2 children, actual fertility is declining dramatically in recent years, especially since the onset of the Great Recession. Historically, sudden economic shocks have left a clear imprint on annual fertility rates. The Great Recession is a contemporary example. This figure is probably well known to many of you. Fertility reversal after 2008 was especially pronounced in countries and regions that experienced stronger economic downturns and faster increases in unemployment. Growing uncertainty has become an intrinsic characteristic of contemporary globalized societies, where an increasing number of young adults are moving today in and out of jobs, which may give little meaning to their lives. And nowadays, after 10 years since the onset of the Great Recession, Europe is facing a new fertility winter. Norway, we are used to think at Norway as a high fertility country. Norway reached the lowest total fertility in history in 2008, and also Finland reached its lowest fertility in history in 2018, which is estimated now at 1.4, down from 1.9 children per woman on average in 2010. A bit further west, Scotland is also facing declining fertility rates since 2010, and even France is currently experiencing an unexpected fertility decline. Here, if you see the figure, the black line is Italy. Their fertility was already low, but is again declining also in Italy, and a similar trend is to be found in Spain and Greece. Fertility in Italy, after a rebound at the beginning of the new millennium, is now facing a constant fertility decline with a TFR estimated at 1.3 in 2019. Italy displays again a so-called lowest low fertility, which means the lowest fertility among low fertility countries. And these are just a few examples of contemporary fertility trends in Europe. The question is why? What is happening? And the central explanation I will put forward in this presentation is the rise of fundamental uncertainty. The increasing speed, dynamics, and volatility of outcomes of globalization and the new wave of technological change make it increasingly difficult for individuals to predict their future and choose between alternatives and strategies. And the Great Recession has renewed the view that globalization is unpredictable and out of control. This state of affairs generates an extraordinary level of fundamental uncertainty, which I argue represents the game changer in contemporary societies and family life courses. And the recent COVID-19 emergency has reinforced the perception that we are living in the era of uncertainty. To understand the new demographic scenario we are facing nowadays in Europe, we need to change paradigm from the macro to the micro level, so the attention becomes focused on individuals as the agents of demographic action. In micro-level contemporary research, the forces of uncertainty has been traditionally operationalized through objective indicators of actual and past individuals' labor market situation. Nowadays, papers addressing the relations between fertility and employment uncertainty are booming, and employment uncertainty is usually operationalized through unemployment and more recently also through the diffusion of temporary jobs. A new generation of studies also underline the importance of considering the persistence of employment uncertainty. Employment uncertainty is, according to these studies, especially detrimental for fertility when the experience of uncertainty cumulates over individuals' life courses. And a few studies also recognize that uncertainty is not only about employment. Housing uncertainties might be equally important as the employment uncertainty at the time of family formation. All these papers, all these analyses are certainly informative. I like this type of research and I'm conducting this type of research. But they leave, however, important questions unanswered, posing serious challenges to our understanding of the determinants of fertility. For example, in 2009, Northern European economies resumed their economic growth, but their total fertility rate, their fertility, started to decrease substantially. So the question is, what are the driving forces of fertility decline in Nordic countries after a Great Recession that, in hard numbers, they really never experienced, or at least not to any relevant extent? And more generally, what are the drivers of the new fertility winter that contemporary European societies are currently facing? And from a Southern European perspective, let me say that the European post-crisis shift towards very low fertility rate come as highly unexpected, especially in Nordic countries, not only because Nordic countries have been much less severely hit by the economic crisis, but because for us they represent a benchmark in terms of gender equality. female labor force participation, youth emancipation, and the diffusion of new family forms, all factors well known to go hand in hand with higher fertility. So what is happening? I believe that while the Great Recession is over, uncertainty remains and continues to affect young adults' lives. So the point is, do we understand economic uncertainty? What is economic uncertainty? From an economic point of view, the formal definition of economic uncertainty is quite clear. It represents the lack of clarity about future economic prospects, which means unknown probability distributions to possible outcomes. So already from this definition is clear that uncertainty is about the future, not about the present or the past. And that cumulative employment disadvantage that we are used to include in our statistical models as a proxy of uncertainty only tell us little and identify what we can refer to as the statistical shadow of the past. But we know very little about uncertain futures. Some prospective measures of uncertainty are unknown. But to properly address the effects of uncertainty on family dynamics, we need to change perspective, recognizing that an economic uncertainty is a subjective and prospective notion. So from this point of view, with this presentation, I argue that fundamental uncertainty needs to be conceptualized and operationalized, taking into account that people use works of imagination, producing their own narrative of the future. Personal narratives of the future can be defined as imagined futures embodied in social elements. These narratives of the futures become potent driving forces of reproductive decisions in spite of uncertainty, irrespective of any structural constraints and their subjective perception. Let me be more clear with an example. 3 simple words, whatever it takes, pronounced by the then president of the European Central Bank, Mario Draghi, proved strong enough to debunk a global financial speculation against the euro in 2012. Of course, the European Central Bank was apparently prepared to unleash its monetary power, but this was unnecessary. The narrative of a new attitude of the European Central Bank towards the future was enough. This is a textbook example used in demography and in economic sociology to demonstrate that actors take decisions considering not only structural constraints, but also narratives of the future. And clearly, personal narratives of the future are anchored in existing cultural and institutional frames, as well as public images produced by the press, social media, and our powerful opinion formers. As a corollary, a crucial building block of personal narratives are shared narratives advanced by online press and social media. This slide includes just a sample of articles that appeared in the news prior to the coronavirus emergency. Now, press-related narratives all focus on the new pandemic crisis and its subsequent uncertainty, again posing a new challenge for the future prospects of fertility. And in addition, the global political uncertainty, filtered again by press and media, reinforces the fear of the future. From a representative survey conducted in 2018, it emerged that the threat of international political instability is one of the biggest concerns among survey respondents in Europe. This global political uncertainty has reinforced the narrative of an uncertain future among young European citizens. So, approaching the conclusion of this first part, the major challenge for official statistics I would like to put forward here is that the focus on past and actual structural constraints and their subjective perception is not enough to explain the new fertility winter in Europe. I believe that net of factors, and I use on purpose the wording net of factors because in our statistical models we still need to control for actual employment situations and past employment situations, but net of factors that operationalize the statistical shadow of the past, young adults might postpone fertility because their narrative of the future is uncertain, so we do need information about uncertainty also. And given the recent COVID-19 emergency, the specter of the future is even more relevant in understanding demographic change. So I argue that more research is needed to study fertility dynamics in the era of uncertainty, which means that research needs survey data. To address these new challenges, we necessarily need survey data because only registered data do not give us all this information we need about perceptions of uncertainty and future-oriented perceptions of uncertainty. Survey data that collect information about individuals' employment and economic status and their future-oriented perceptions to grasp uncertainty vis-à-vis family life courses are essential. We need an integrated demographic data system that collects family, employment, and education histories complemented with survey data that include questions on opinions, attitudes, perception over major social changes. And also, since this is missing in many European countries, also we need panel data on families that include rich socio-demographic information. I would like to start from the research side. I would be, of course, happy to tell you how in Florence with my research team we are studying uncertainty and its effects on fertility. We are actually using a mixture of methods that combine traditional micro-level survey research, lab experiments to provide internal validity to causal claims on the effects of economic uncertainty on fertility, and big data analysis to detect the uncertainty filtered by media and press shared narratives. I will be happy to tell you this if there is time, but what is more important for the moment is to know how in general official statistics are reacting to these demographic changes and this call for more research on the determinants of fertility. So for this I leave the floor to Eleonora, and I'm open to some midterm questions if you have before we move to Eleonora's presentation. Alternatively, I can, of course, answer your questions at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a question. What could be done by governments to revert these narratives of uncertainty?
Do I have to collect questions, or do you prefer?
No, if you want to have, if you prefer, you can reply now, question by question, or you collect it and reply at the end, as you prefer. So the first one is about what could be done by governments to revert these narratives of uncertainty, and then again about uncertainty. We have a question, it is measurable by using surveys. Which question could you imagine? So maybe if you want to add questions, maybe. If you want to think as you prefer, you can reply at the end.
No, I can start with these two. The first one is extremely difficult, and of course this is different countries by countries, and before suggesting what to do to government, we need to study more this topic because there are very few information about this. From some first results that we have, actually the point seems that the perception of uncertainty is much more important or equally important to actual structural constraints in directing, for instance, fertility intentions. what is the role of the media and social media is to be seen, but the point is what is happening in Nordic countries. If fertility is declining so strongly, but at the same time the unemployment did not spread, the diffusion of temporary employment did not spread, this means that there is probably a general reaction to a generalized feeling of uncertainty. How do we measure this uncertainty? We just published a paper in which we basically review all possible measures, all possible questions which we can use to grasp uncertainty from existing surveys. You can find this in the website of my project. I think I put it at the end of the slides. The two possible questions which prove to be strong in this is, the first one is, how likely do you think is that you will still have a job in 6 months? So the idea of stability of your employment. And another question is more related to the concept, to the notion of resilience. Your perception of resilience to react to adverse economic shocks. For instance, if you were to lose your job, how likely is that you would find a job with a similar salary within 6 months? And you perhaps know the Gender and Generation Survey program, which is a generalized program of several surveys that will be launched in the next months in all over European countries to collect information about demography and social aspects. And they now included a specific module on uncertainty, exactly using all this kind of prospective of future-oriented questions about uncertainty. What do you expect will happen in the future about your employment, your economic situation, and so on?
Okay, another one. We have another question about Nordic countries, because they say Finnish researchers have pointed out to low-educated men showing lowest numbers of children. Should we pay more attention to them?
Yes, definitely. There are a series of projects in Finland now about rising inequalities as a new determinant of this fertility decline. And what is now in the Finnish context astonishing is the incredibly high rates of childlessness among men, and especially among low-educated men. And one of the main reasons of this so low fertility and high rates of childlessness among low-educated men for the moment seems a difficult marriage and union market. So it's not the fact that low-educated men are having fewer children. The main reason is that they are without a partner. And this is also generalized, but for instance, in Southern Europe, the solution for these rising rates of childlessness among low-educated men has been mixed unions. Basically, low-educated men are marrying more and more often migrant women, and they do find again a match in the marriage market, while in the Nordic countries there is really this problem now in the marriage market, and this led some low-educated men systematically excluded from forming a union, which is then rise inequalities again.
Okay, thank you. And we have a last question. Is it possible to find periods of coexistence between uncertainty and high fertility?
Yes. Yes. This is a very good point. There is an old publication in demography in 1994, which is called Uncertainty Reduction. The idea is that when you are very uncertain in your life course, which is the easiest way to have a fixed point in life, to have some certainty, is to marry and have children. If you have no chances in the mainstream economy, if you have no chances in your employment career, you may focus on an alternative career, which is marrying and especially for women, then become a mother. This is difficult to find evidence now in Europe. There is some evidence about that, about low-educated women in Germany that seems to accelerate their first child. So there is possible to have coexistence between uncertainty and fertility, but the most driving force is more that uncertainty inhibits fertility, not facilitates.
Okay, so in the meanwhile, another question arrived. I suggest the last one. Then otherwise, please, you can continue asking questions and we will reply at the end. So this one is about Italy. Why in Italy, the year of the Great Recession, the drop in births was stronger than in other countries?
Okay. It was stronger, but also delayed compared to other countries. It was delayed compared to other countries because, as usual, in Italy, the family at the beginning served as a buffer to mitigate the effect of the recession. The couples were strongly protected by their family savings. So this caused a sort of lag in the effects of the recession on fertility in Italy. Then it started to decline. It was in relative terms, perhaps stronger than in other regions because we were just with a weaker welfare provision for families, and we have a very weak, for instance, diffusion of childcare when the child is aged 0 to 3. So Italy is usually unprepared in terms of family policies. It is called by some famous demographer in Italy, Massimo Levi Bacci, the paradox in Italy of too much family but too few children. Exactly the country in which the debate about the importance of the family is the strongest. It is also the country that lacks family policies and where fertility is the lowest.
Okay, thank you, Daniele. So I think we can give the floor now to Eleonora, but please, if you have any other question, you can use the chat and the question will be answered at the end of the webinar. Okay, thank you, Daniele. See you later at the end. So Eleonora.
Okay, here I am.
Okay. Yeah,
good afternoon, everyone. Can you listen to me?
Yeah. Yes, and we can see you.
Okay, perfect. So I will try in the second part of this presentation to respond to some of the questions. Well, I'll try to respond to all the questions that Daniele asked us, and I'm just give you an overview about what official statistics do and which data we have to analyze this phenomenon. And I'll just give you some information about 3 surveys and about registry. So you can find also the web link here where I just list 3 surveys that are the most important for our purpose, that are Family and Social Subject, SILC, and the Labor Force Survey. And then I list here 2 registers that are birth register and resident population, but I also give you some information about database and repository that are open access from ISTAT. And here we have the list of surveys that ISTAT conducts and the registry that allows us to understand which is the demographic phenomenon and the trends. So here we have demo.istat.it that is a repository of many of the information about demography and what ISTAT collects as demographic data, such as residential population and birth and migrations, birth, marriages, and separation and divorce, and many others. And then there is dati.istat.it, that is the data warehouse where the cross-tabulation that includes also territorial level of data indicators that we can use to understand the phenomenon we are studying, but also all that information that we have at disposition in Italian National Institute of Statistics. And trying to have an idea of what about statistics are about, we have a list, an alphabetical list of statistics you can consult, and there you can find how many documents are about the issue you are interested in, and find which fitted best for your purpose. Another very important information that we have about data is time availability, because we know that studying some phenomena are really important to have a trends of this data, and time series helps us to understand how this phenomenon goes on and how we have the present situation, and to study the present situation just to understand the evolution of these issues we are studying. Now I'm going in deep with the survey I'm in charge of, that is Family and Social Subject. That it is really about what Daniele asked us, an integrated system of histories. Well, Family and Social Subject till 1998 collects histories about family, employment, and educational histories of people. So we have information, retrospective information about all the steps that conduct to the present situation. We have also the international comparability through GGP, as Daniele was talking us, and this gives us the international comparability of many of the aspects that we analyze through this survey, but more in deep, these are the main thematic areas. Here we have the main issue that we try to study thanks to this survey, and these are household structure in terms of cohabiting persons of the households, but also family commuters, and emerging family forms such as the living apart together, so the non-cohabiting couples. And we study, thanks to this part of the questionnaire, also youth emancipation in terms of permanence and living of the young people from parental home. We have a big part of the questionnaire about kinship networks, and linked to this, the informal aid networks. Another part that is really important in the data we collect is social mobility. So we have information about parent employment when the interviews was 14. And so thanks with this data, we can have intergenerational mobility, but also intra-generational, because we have the the job histories from the first job to a maximum of 11 episodes till actual work. So we have information that gives us the entire history of employment of the interviews. I just choose one output to link this information with the idea of uncertainty, because we have here in the questionnaire a part that is about fertility intentions and the ideal number of children. Okay, and here you can find for people aged 2049 the relevance that is the family size of 2 children, that is always the best, but also a great part of people who is in the middle, in the core ages for reproductive ages, that still don't know how many children they want to have. So we have 30% of people aged 49 years old who still don't know. They don't have a plan. They have no idea in how many children is their ideal size. And here we are talking about childless people. So those who should have the part of population that is ready to have one child, still one child, but they respond us that they would like to have 2. And it is all about family and social subject, and I'll talk you very briefly about SILK and labor force survey. Here is SILK, that is a survey harmonized at European level that gives us really important information about social exclusion, poverty, material deprivation, and obviously thanks to data about income. And the output I choose to show you, it's about social exclusion and poverty by family type. So here we have lone people aged less than 65, lone people aged more than 65, couples, and so on. This is really, really useful for us to obtain information about how Italian families are distributed by these indicators, and have information about poverty in families. Then another point that is helpful for us is the data collected by labor force survey. And it's about women labor market participation, educational achievement, and employment distribution among families. Here we have data that describes households on 2-income families, male breadwinner, and all the information that are individuals, but also about household. And the output is about the differences between trimesters of the survey in labor force participation for male and female. Okay, and this first part about survey is concluded. The second part of my presentation is about registry. So what's about administrative sources that are the second part of what Daniele was talking about. Microdata are from surveys, macro data are from registers, and here we have events. So the births, resident population, marriages, separation and divorce, as you told you before. And I will go in deep just with one of these registry, that is birth registry. And this this registry of events of birth started from 1999. It gives us information at municipal level. It gives us also a lot of information about the born, but also about the mother and father, marital status and citizenship, that allows us to study the trends in main fertility indicators that are, as Daniele shows us before, TFR, and also the total fertility rate, but also the specific fertility rate. And it is all of these data are significative at a municipal level. And I'm sure you already well know this figure. And this is the specific fertility rates, that is one of the most powerful representation of what we are talking about. And it shows us how fertility shifts and decreases. And we have here data from 1995 and 2018, and it is just enough to understand how it changes over time. But okay, going to challenges. I will show you very rapidly and briefly what official statistics do as advantages. What a huge amount of data you have at disposition to analyze, to study demographic team. But I have to be honest, and there are some disadvantages about all these sources that I show you. And for the retrospective data, we know that retrospective data are jeopardized by memory effect and social desiderability. And so we have to fight that, to try to find a solution for this. But also intentions. I told you that we ask people their intentions about living parental home, starting a cohabitation, having one or another child. But we don't know really if they realize these intentions, if they reached the goals they told us that will have obtained within 3 years. And another point that is very, very difficult to achieve is the employment history. 11 episodes are not enough. Employment histories are more and more complex and diversified. So we need something new, something different, that it allows us to understand changes and new perspective of life courses. We have a little solution, no, it's a big solution, is that did a new arrangement of data collection that it's in the way we are trying to do what I'm explaining you, and it is called the integrated system of registers, and it's a very huge thing to do, because what we have here, and this is our real challenge, we have data both from surveys and administrative sources, and we integrated physically the elementary unit from one sources with another sources with an ID number, and this allow us to understand what's before a survey and what happened after our survey. And in this way we have I think a little more answers to our questions, but it's still in the way, this kind of integration. So we are studying to find the right way to link data and elementary unit, whichever they were. Now, I'll thank you. I'm sorry if I was too in a hurry, and I expect questions if you have.
Thank you, Eleonora. So yes, you can ask questions again using the chat. I know that Daniele wants to reply again to a questions. So a question you received before.
Yes, but when there is, we can collect questions. I was just realizing that the question was about why in Italy the number of births dropped so strongly after the recession, and I replied in terms of fertility. The number of births are totally something else, in the sense that we shouldn't be surprised that in Italy, year after year, the number of births are declining and declining, because the number of births do not only depend on how many children do women give birth on average, they also depend on how many women there are. So since in Italy we are not having children, basically fertility started to decline since 1970s. Today the number of women giving birth to children are shrinking, and they will shrink year after year. So even if they will start doing incredibly higher number of children, the higher fertility, they do give birth to a higher number of children per person, the total number of births will decline year after year. This is not possible to be reversed, in the sense that this is called demographic trap. We made some simulations to see how much was, which one was the role of the Great Recession of this shrinking number of births, and basically this huge drop in the number of births can be attributable for the 70% to the population structure. So it's some mechanic demographic force due to the fact that there are no women anymore giving birth to children, while a 30% in the drop of the number of births, that can be attributable to uncertainty and the Great Recession.
Okay, thank you, Daniele. So in the meanwhile, we received some questions for Eleonora. So the first one is, I think, asking to address data integration and privacy issues. And then maybe we can just read all the three questions, because I think they are maybe somehow interconnected. So how do you plan to integrate the network links, for example, the kinship links with the family in the estimation process? And then what is the consent raised from respondents on linking the survey and registered data? So again, I think a link to privacy issues.
Okay, it's a big issue. You are perfectly, it's a point, because we have an authority for privacy that it's really on set this this integration, and we have obviously a way to this linkage not okay. The process is you have information about a person, and you have to link only a name and some information about place of birth, date of birth, and something else, and and associate with this personal information with an ID. So there are no survey data in the linking process. Then you don't have personal information in survey data. You have only the ID that it is associated with a key, a personal key that is linked. So I know there is a problem in maintaining privacy, but there is a system of protection of privacy. I wish I answered. And about kinship, as in how to integrate the network links. Okay, we give respondent an informative that have all the has all the information about laws that we use to protect privacy, and so the respondents are they know what we do with the data we collect. And I don't understand, I'm sorry, the question about network links and integration with family. Could you explain me?
Yeah, maybe Pedro can try to write again the question. In the meanwhile, we have another one from Daniele. So I will read this, and then maybe we see if we are back with the other question for Eleonora. So for Daniele, could the low fertility rate be linked to cultural factors rather than uncertainty? Maybe young people have another model of life in their mind. Thanks a lot.
Yes, sure. There is a long-term change in terms of values, ideals, but the point is that this is exactly a long-term change, which is going year after year. So this is not does not explain this huge drop since 2010. The new fertility winter cannot be due to this only to these cultural changes, because these cultural changes are gradual year after year, and they do not happen suddenly.
Okay, thank you. So we didn't receive any specification from Pedro. Oh, yeah, now. Kinship networks, map of non-cohabitants kinship.
Aspect. Okay.
It has to do with the slides 24.
Okay, so I go back 24.
Yeah.
Okay. Kinship. Okay. A part of the questionnaire of the family and social subject questionnaire is about how many siblings do you have, how frequently do you see them, and all of this information are also about parents, grandparents, and children, grandchildren, and there is a shorter part of the questionnaire that is about all other kind of kin you have. So, for example, cousins and friends also, another part of the social network you have at disposition, you have got, and how many of these people you can consider as a support network. So here you can find this as a network of support, and also in which kind of network you are about informal aid, so the aid that you gives, and also the aid that you and your family receive. By non-cohabitants people, because we just consider a family as a solidary formation. So in a cohabiting household, that there is a solidarity that is given. Here we study solidarity about that is with other people that not cohabit with you. If I think it's the answer. And
thank you. Yeah, we have another question, I guess, for both of you. Could you please summarize or give an example? What data do we need more from the official statistics necessary for the demographic research? What statistics do you need more if compared to the current population statistics or census?
Yeah, I think the biggest need for many European countries is the need of panel data on families. Basically, the panel data that we have and that Eleonora reviewed are the silk data, but they are extremely economic oriented. They do miss completely information about perceptions and family life courses or gender equality. We do need panel data that provide us with rich socio-demographic information, perception, future-oriented perception to grasp uncertainty. Unfortunately, the silk data are super useful. I'm basically using these when I'm doing comparative analysis across European countries, but they do only rely on what I called in my presentation the statistical shadow of the past: cumulative employment, disadvantage, and income, but they miss socio-demographic richer information, for instance, on gender equality.
Okay, thank you. Don't see more questions. I would like just to ask to Eleonora, I'm just curious, do you know if in any other European country they are just trying to do the same, the integrated system? Are you aware of similar projects?
No, honestly, I don't know. It's not my field, and so I just admit I don't know. I don't know if there is something similar, somewhere else. I think it could be a big. Valuable project. It's a big project because it gives us the possibility to have information before the sample, so you can choose to have a sample that it just have information on the first step, before the first step we go on the field, and then what we would like to have is something that it's not a longitudinal survey, but it's quite something similar, because we have the mobility, for example, of population. So we know if I asked you if you have intention to leave your parental home within 3 years, we know if there is a residential mobility, and if we can link our data at a macro level with individual data, we just have information how many of these intentions, how many goals people can reach, and I think it's a big issue. I wish we could have this data.
So we have on the chat, in the UK, we are trying to combine administrative data sources as part of a transformation project to support replace a census, and there are plans to include social responses onto that in the future. So yeah, of course, something is moving also in the other countries, because this is I think really interesting, but is also a challenge, of course.
Yes, I just add one thing. I know that in Norway there's something like this. They adjust administrative sources data with survey data. So they have something like this that it's a joint way to collect data, if I remember.
Okay, thank you. So we don't have any other questions, so I will just like to thank you very much, Daniele and Eleonora, for this very interesting presentation and for your willingness to reply to all the questions. And many thanks, of course, also to all other participants who join us today from many different places. Well, you can already download the presentation, as I said, on the IMOS 2020 events website, and the link of the recording of the webinar will be available there as soon as possible. And the recording of the past webinars are already linked on the IMOS 2020 events website, and the recordings are available on the IMOS official YouTube channel, which is named the European Master in Official Statistics IMOS. So in the meantime, while you are waiting to listen to the recording again, I kindly ask you to check the inbox of the email account that you use for registering to the webinar, as you already received the link to a short survey about today's webinar. We really appreciate your feedback to future improvement of our webinar. So the next webinar is scheduled on Tuesday, 21st of April, when Anne Rother from the European Commission will be presenting on the use of geospatial data in official statistics. I hope that you will join us for this next webinar and also for the other webinars in our program. So thank you for now. Thank you again to Eleonora and Daniele, and I wish you a nice evening also to everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.